He looked like trouble the moment he stepped onto the field. Too curious, too bright-eyed for a place like this. The others moved like they'd already lost something. But him? He moved like someone who didn't know the weight of war yet. Or maybe someone who didn't care. They lined up as they always did, stiff and silent, the cold air biting at the edges of their nerves. I walked the line, my boots crunching against the gravel with the weight of 20 years of battles, dead men, and discipline. Then I stopped in front of him. Kalen Marek. I remember the name before I remember the face. A last-minute placement, barely out of basic. Unremarkable on paper. But nothing about him felt unremarkable up close. He saluted, and something in me cracked. Not a break. Just the sound of old stone shifting, dangerous but quiet. A memory of softness that didn't belong here. That couldn't survive here. His fingers brushed his brow too slow, too graceful. It was textbook, but it was art. I'd been saluted 1,000 times in 1,000 places by soldiers who'd learned to do it with fear or hollow respect. But his eyes met mine, steady. No fear. No arrogance. Just conviction. I told myself it was nerves, that he'd be like all the others soon enough. Hardened, bitter, silent. War would drain that light from him. It always did. That was the job. The cost. You either gave everything or lost everything trying not to. But still, I watched him longer than I should have. Just a beat too long. The kind of pause a man like me couldn't afford. I barked a command and moved down the line, but the echo of his gaze followed me. That night, I told myself I didn't think of him when I took off my gloves, or when I lit my pipe and stared out into the dark. But I did, not because he was special. Because he was dangerous. Because something in me stirred when I looked at him. Something I'd buried long before most of these recruits were born. Something I had no right to feel. Not here. Not now. He looked like trouble. Not the kind you punish, but the kind that changes everything. And I wasn't ready for change. So I watched from a distance. Measured his steps. Noted the way he carried his rifle like it was something sacred. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest. But when the others stumbled, he offered his hand like it was instinct. Like mercy hadn't been bled out of him yet. That terrified me more than any enemy ever could. Because mercy has no place on the battlefield. But the way Kalen Marek saluted me, it felt like the start of a war I hadn't prepared for. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure whose side I was on. I was trained to command men, not to want them. Desire, in any form, was weakness. That lesson had been drilled into me harder than how to load a rifle or take a hit. You don't flinch, you don't falter, and you sure as hell don't feel. Not here. Not ever. But every time Kalen looked at me during drills, it felt like he was peeling off my uniform with just his eyes. He didn't gawk. Didn't smirk. There was no mockery in it, no disrespect. Just a steady, searing kind of attention, as if he was trying to memorize the way I moved, the tone I used, the man beneath all the metals and steel. And I hated how much I wanted to let him. I caught him once, just a glance that lingered a second too long as I corrected another recruit's stance. His lips parted like he was going to say something, but he didn't. He just watched. And when our eyes met, he didn't look away. Neither did I. It was a mistake. That single locked gaze felt like a live wire running through my chest. And when I finally tore my eyes away, I barked an order at no one in particular, louder than I needed to, as if shouting could silence the heat crawling up my neck. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it, that he looked at everyone like that, curious, intent, open. But I knew better, because I've lived long enough to recognize hunger when I see it. And Kalen Marek wasn't hungry for power or rank. He was hungry for me. And part of me, some ruined, secret part, ached to feed that hunger. I began avoiding him during training, which only made it worse. The absence made him louder in my head. I found myself watching him through the corner of my eye, noticing things I shouldn't. The way he bit the inside of his cheek when he was focused, the soft way he encouraged the others when they struggled, the quiet grief in his expression when he thought no one was looking. He carried something inside him, a kind of pain he didn't speak of. Maybe that's what made him dangerous. Not the wanting, but the fact that he knew how to hide it. Like me, that night, I stayed back after drills. The field was empty, moonlight stretching shadows across the worn dirt. I told myself I was checking supplies. I told myself a lot of things. But really, I was trying to outpace a ghost I hadn't named yet. His name was Kalen. And every time he looked at me, I felt less like a general and more like a man. And that, more than war, more than death, terrified me. Because I was losing a battle no one could see. Not even him. One day he messed up. Nothing major. Just a misstep in formation. A delay in responding to a command. But enough to set my teeth on edge. Enough to make me call him out in front of everyone. "Recruit Marek," I snapped, voice sharp enough to slice through the midday heat. "Perhaps you'd like to take over command since you seem so eager to improvise." Some of the other recruits winced. Kalen didn't. He stood tall, chest heaving from the drills, sweat tracing lines down his temple. But his eyes, steady, calm, maddeningly unshaken, locked with mine. "No, sir," he said. "I'll follow better next time." It should have ended there. I should have turned and walked away, satisfied that I'd put him in his place. But something about his tone made me press harder. "You'll follow better?" I stepped closer. "You don't get to be better next time, recruit. Not out here. Out here, one mistake gets someone killed. You think this is a schoolyard." His jaw tightened just barely. Then, God help me, he tilted his head slightly and said, "Do you ever smile, sir? Or does the war have your face in a chokehold too?" For a breathless second, no one moved. Then someone coughed behind him. Another recruit choked back a laugh. I didn't flinch, but inside I burned. Everyone off the field. "Now!" I barked. They scattered, grateful for the escape. All but him. "You!" I said, pointing to Kalen. "Stay." He didn't protest. Just stood there, posture still disciplined, but mouth twitching like he regretted nothing. Like he was daring me to react. "You find this funny?" I asked, low and even. "That's what this is to you?" "No, sir," he said, but his voice had softened. "Just wondered if the man who trains us to fight for our lives ever gets to feel anything other than rage." I should have sent him home. Could have written him up, made an example of him, ended the whole mess with a stroke of a pen. Instead, I handed him a shovel. "You're on punishment detail. Dig the latrine trench behind the barracks. Start now." He took it without a word, brushing past me close enough that our shoulders almost touched. I watched him go, watched the way the sun hit the back of his neck, the way he didn't look back once. And I hated that my hand was still clenched into a fist long after he was gone. Later that night, I walked past the barracks and saw him still out there, sleeves rolled up, dirt streaked across his forearms. He was humming to himself. And when I stopped to watch him from the shadows, he looked up, straight at me, that damn flicker in his eyes again. Not defiance, not fear, curiosity, affection maybe, and I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to stop asking if I ever smiled. I wanted him to make me. One evening, the range was empty. Everyone else had turned in, exhausted from the day's drills. Everyone but him. I found Kalen there after lights out. Steady hands loading rounds into a battered rifle, his form illuminated by the low, amber glow of the perimeter lamps. He heard my boots crunch over the gravel, but he didn't turn. "You're out past regulation," I said, folding my arms. "I know," he replied without apology. Eyes still locked on the target in the distance. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd try to fix my grouping. I should have written him up. Should have barked an order. Sent him back to barracks. Reminded him of protocol and rank. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer. Watched the way his fingers moved. Slow and sure. Watched the tension in his shoulders. He didn't look tired. He looked restless, like something inside him was vibrating just beneath the surface. He finally turned to me. "Teach me, sir," he said, voice quieter now. "Not just drills. Teach me how you shoot." Something in my chest cracked. It wasn't a request that got me. It was the way he said it, like he already knew I would, like he had peeled me open with nothing but patience and proximity. "Fine," I said, taking the rifle from him. "First thing, you breathe like you're not in a damn rush to die." His laugh was soft. "Yes, sir. We spent an hour like that, shoulder to shoulder, exchanging stares and borrowed warmth. I told myself it was mentorship, discipline, duty. But that night, back in my quarters, I wrote him a letter. I told myself it was protocol, guidance, tactical advice, field notes. But it wasn't. It read like confession. I wrote about the way he made me feel something I had long buried under medals and orders. How his stare unnerved me in a way no battlefield ever had. How I dreamed, damn it all, dreamed of a life beyond uniform and rules, with hands that held me instead of saluted me. I never meant to send it. I folded it and slipped it between the pages of my field manual, where I assumed no one would ever look. I underestimated Kalen Marek. He came to me 3 nights later, silent, but his eyes told me everything. "I was looking for your notes on rifle breath work," he said, almost too casually. "Found something else." He pulled the folded paper from his jacket. My stomach dropped. He opened it, voice low and deliberate, reading every word I had written. Out loud. I couldn't move, could barely breathe. I didn't even know I was gripping the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned white. When he finished, he looked up at me, not mocking, not angry, just searching. "I didn't know what I wanted when I asked you to teach me," he said softly. "Now I do. And I had no orders prepared for that. I knew it was bound to happen. There was a complaint about us. Anonymous, of course. They always are when cowardice masks itself as protocol. The words were vague, laced with suggestion, inappropriate familiarity, favoritism, unprofessional conduct. They didn't name him, but they didn't have to. Everyone knew. The barracks buzzed with rumors louder than a rifle fire. Conversations dropped when I entered a room. Eyes followed me like I'd grown a second shadow. I became the commander they expected. Cold, precise, untouchable. My voice was clipped, my orders sharper. I pretended not to notice the silence Kalen wrapped himself in during drills, or the way he stopped looking at me when he thought I wasn't watching. But he came anyway. One night, not long after lights out, there was a knock on my door. Soft, hesitant, familiar. I didn't have to open it to know who it was. Still I did. Kalen stood there, hair damp from the mist outside, eyes more tired than I'd ever seen them. He didn't salute, didn't smile. "Do you regret it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't have to specify what it was. I should have said yes, for his sake, for mine, for the weight of every unspoken rule etched into my spine since I first put on this uniform. But I couldn't lie not to him. "No," I said. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of everything we couldn't say out loud. Then the alarms blared. Thunderstorm drill. Standard procedure for base readiness. Sirens howled across the grounds. Lightning streaked across the sky in jagged veins. Soldiers scrambled to shelters like ghosts in the dark. But we didn't move. He looked up at me. I look back. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was clarity. We kissed. Hard. Desperate. Real. His hands gripped my jacket like he needed to anchor himself, and I let him. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Years of discipline crumbling under the weight of something far more dangerous than war. Want. The world around us roared. Rain pelted the windows like shrapnel. Sirens screamed. Lightning flashed so bright, I saw his face lit in silver. Eyes wide. Lips swollen from mine. It felt like war and surrender, all at once. I broke the kiss first. My forehead rested against his. Our breaths shared in the stillness. "This isn't safe," I whispered. "I know," he replied, "but it's honest." And that terrified me more than anything ever had. Days later, Command called me in. They knew something. They didn't ask me to sit. Command never did when they wanted you to sweat. The room was small, sterile. No windows. No distractions. Just 4 men with clipped hair, crisp collars, and eyes that had long forgotten what mercy looked like. They didn't accuse me outright. Not at first. That wasn't how this worked. They used words like inquiry and concern, danced around terms like conduct, unbecoming, and compromised authority. But I'd seen enough interrogations to know when the noose was tightening. I sat, spine rigid, heart quiet in the way it always was before war. I was ready. I had my answer rehearsed, clean and cold. There's no proof. No breach of protocol. The recruit misunderstood. A lie that sounded like truth. And then the door opened. Kalen walked in. Uniform immaculate. Shoulders squared. Jaw set. He didn't glance at me. He didn't hesitate. He just walked forward, past the empty chair behind me, and stood at my side. Not behind me. Beside me, there was a pause. One of those long, loaded silences where you can almost hear careers ending. "Recruit Marek," one of the officers said, his voice sharp. "You were not summoned." "I summoned myself," Kalen replied evenly. "If you're going to question him about me, then I belong in the room." Another pause. Longer this time. The air turned electric. I knew what that moment meant. For both of us. I turned to him. Just slightly. Just enough. "You don't have to do this," I murmured. He looked at me then, finally, and the answer was in his eyes. I already did. So I stood. I didn't wait for the verdict. I didn't let them finish their list of accusations or threats. I removed the insignia from my chest and set it gently on the table, like laying a weapon down. "I'm not resigning because of shame," I said. "I'm resigning because, for the first time in my life, I followed an order I gave myself." No one stopped me. Outside, the sky was heavy with storm clouds, but the air was cool, clean. I hadn't felt it in years. Not like that. Then I heard him behind me. Footsteps. Steady. Certain. "You're going to get in trouble for walking out like that," I said without turning. Kalen stepped beside me. Already did. Figured I'd double down. We both laughed then, short, breathless, stunned. Like we couldn't believe we'd actually done it. I thought it would feel like an ending. Like a fall. But it didn't. It felt like the first step into something terrifying and right. Something that didn't come with medals or orders, but with freedom, with choice. With him, we didn't chase peace. We built it, brick by uncertain brick. The world outside the base was louder than we remembered. The silence of command was replaced with the chirp of morning birds and the gentle rustle of leaves instead of drills. Strange at first, but it grew on us. We bought a small cottage tucked between pine trees and sky. Nothing fancy. Just space enough for 2 stubborn men learning to be soft again. Kalen learned to cook. Badly. I learned to laugh when he burned the toast 3 mornings in a row and blamed the traitorous toaster. We argued about curtains once. kissed about it later. And somehow, that felt like victory. I still wake before dawn. Habit, muscle memory. I make coffee. He stumbles in half asleep, hair a mess, mumbling something about obscene mornings. And even then, especially then, I love him with a steadiness that no uniform ever gave me. He still calls me sir sometimes, half teasing, half reverent. I still answer without thinking. We don't talk much about the base anymore. But every now and then, he'll look at me across the garden, sun on his face, and I'll remember that first salute. The bright-eyed recruit who cracked something open in me I thought was sealed shut. I gave up medals, ranks, and the weight of reputation for him. And if I had to do it again, I wouldn't hesitate. Because what we've built here, our quiet rebellion, our chosen life, is the first thing that's ever truly felt like mine. Sometimes at night, he rests his head on my chest and says, I still can't believe you walked out. And I always reply, I didn't walk out. I walked toward. That's the truth. I didn't leave the army for a man. I left for the version of myself I only became when he looked at me like I was worth loving. And I still love him like he's the only order I never want to give up,